welcome to Flying for Flavor. This is episode 42, I think. No, 41. 41. I can't remember which number it is anymore. We are, of course, to celebrate talking about weddings and destination weddings today, we felt it was appropriate to bring out the pink wine again.
Pink wine. Hashtag pink wine.
It just signifies blushing bride. It's one of those things. It's an easy drinking wine if you don't want to go into bubbly. That's a really kind of pretty one. It looks great for pictures. And again, I'm going to say it, and every time we're serving a rosé, please don't be scared off by rosé wines. They are not all sweet. A lot of them are dry, and most of them are usually made with red wine grapes. So today's wine is actually from the Rioja region. So it's La Rioja. You can roll the R's. Rioja region is the one of the central regions in Spain.
Norm's favorite.
Yes, my husband bought this wine. It was one of those things that I had another rosé that was scheduled for this episode, and he already had this one open for us and started pouring us samples prior to him leaving for tonight. So I guess we're having it. It's actually really nice. It's very pretty. So the brand name is, the producer is called Ontanon. So Ontanon. It's a 2017, and the interesting thing is actually a blend of the Viura grape and the Tempranillo. So Viura is not really one of those grapes that you would find in a lot of blends, but it's found a lot in Spain. So I think it's going to be a nice fruity counterbalance to that Tempranillo, which tends to be a little bit tingly on the end of your tongue. Usually for red wine production, Tempranillo is what they use in Rioja blends, especially for wines that they want to go really well with spicy and heavier foods. It does accentuate spice a little well. So blending it with that fruitier grape is actually making it a little softer. But Tempranillo's got a lot of flavor as it is, and it's also known for being very dry. So again, it's drinking a red wine. So all you guys who are scared of drinking rosés,
And you know what? Tempranillo is one of my favorite reds too.
I know. So anyways, it's a really good one. I'm assuming it's fairly new to the LCBO because that's how Norm shops. He tends to look at the new releases first. So I'll have the link on the show notes as always. Okay, so what do we start with first? So I'm doing this episode because Cynthia was just at a destination wedding. She came home and was chatting with Stacy about destination weddings, being the travel agent. Both Cynthia and I were both married at a destination wedding.
Separately.
not together.
Not to each other.
That's a different show.
And when I do get married, I will do a destination wedding.
And I've actually even talked to my son that if he decides he wants to do a destination wedding, because he's, saw ours and he's seen others, he knows the ins and outs and he knows what's involved now. So it's a great option for people. There's a lot of pros and cons to it. So we can kind of do the pros and cons in each of the sections as we going along. So let's start off with the basics. Let's talk about the travel arrangements for destination weddings. Stacey, that can be your section.
Okay.
Because you are the pro on this.
Okay.
So what are some of the common questions? What things are people looking for? She's got notes.
For every provider, I've got like a packet. It depends on what you're looking for. What kind of property, price point, island, location. You have to narrow down that firstly. And then it depends on what kind of packages. Every property has a different set of packages. Probably a basic line package, including usually the room of the bride and the groom. And then X amount of rooms on top of it are held at a group rate. Then sometimes they'll include the reception, sparkling wine on the beach. If you choose the beach location, if it's rainy, they'll have an alternative area for you. Certain things are included in package price. And because you're doing all inclusives, everybody's reservation is a la carte dinner that night. So it's already included in your price. So, there's so many benefits that way. But setting it up is just a matter of coming into getting a hold of a travel agent, setting up a group price point. Usually these days what we do is we set up a website specifically only to access for the groups that are involved. People are added to the Facebook page or a certain web page, and all of the information is usually laid out right there, and it goes from there.
So do you have to, I did this twice. So once for my wedding, then once for my 10th anniversary. The first time we booked as a group. I found with group reservations There was always issues with flight seating, where we tend to all get split up, and we had a lot of first-time travelers with us, right? My parents, my grandparents. My son was 11 or 12 at the time. So as much as he was fairly independent to a certain extent, with the rest of the family, I'm sure that, he was end up being seated like far away from us. Like, there's all kinds of issues, and we were told it was because it was a group booking.
Wow.
So we don't get the same flexibility for the seats, is what we were told. But so the second time, and the other thing is, everyone has different payment schedules of when they can pay and when they're going to leave. And we also found that, so on a hunch, what we did the second time was, here's the resort we're going to. Right, here's the resort we're going to. This is the day we're going to have our little party, because it was like an anniversary. We renewed our vows and everything on that day. So just like a wedding. We're going to be there. Here are the rates. There's all the information about the resort. Here's how you can book it. Here's all the contact information. Here's everything you need to know.
Right.
And then I allowed people to kind of book their own. First of all, some people had their own favorite travel agent that they preferred to book through, which was fine. Some people shortened their trip. They couldn't come for the entire week, so they actually chose the 5-day option.
Right.
So they made sure to arrive just before and maybe stayed a little later. There was just a lot of flexibility that way. And this way it was like little details, because we had to take my parents with us.
Yes.
And, it was 10 years since the last time they were there, and they don't travel that often out of the country. So they did not want to leave our side. So we were very adamant on making sure that their seats were next to us, and, where their room was located in the resort. So we had a little bit more flexibility. Do you find there's a difference, or you find everyone still just does the group thing, or you think that's better? I'm just kind of looking for an input.
I think that now, I've only done group ones, but I don't only do them at resorts. I've done them like Castle in Ireland. I've also done one with a group of family it was an anniversary thing over in Italy, in Tuscany. Yep. So it doesn't always have to be destination Caribbean. It can be destination on a cruise ship. It can be destination any favorite country of the world. And then you just work around that. Is it better to go by groups?
I think everyone has to be leaving together, coming home together.
There usually is a set time frame if you are doing groups. What I would still do, if you're suggesting of looking to do one, you do the group way. You say this is the group option. If you're unable to do this, here's some contacts, and they can book you outside of the group timing.
Okay. And the group's a minimum number of people usually, or so many rooms, I'm guessing?
Yes, and every provider is different.
Oh, okay.
Certain travel providers are 8 people is a group.
Oh.
Yeah, you can have 8 people going as a group. Some are 10, some are 12. So that's like 4 rooms.
So we did, so for ours, everyone booked with the same travel agent, but we didn't do a specific group. We also stayed at a separate resort from our guests. And we only had, I think, 20 guests overall.
Isn't it? Because it used to be at one time it was book 20 people get 2 free or something like that, right?
It depends now.
But our experience with my brother's wedding recently, so they had arranged a group through a travel agent. We were not in a position to book at the time that everyone else had to book, because the trip happened during dance competition season. So whether or not we were going to be available, all of us could go, or only myself or something. So we ended up booking independently 6 months after the rest of the group did. And so our advantage was that, we chose our seats on our flight. But also, interestingly enough, at the actual resort, we ended up right next to, actually right above my brother's in-laws, right next to his best man, and just across like a yard from where my brother and sister-in-law were staying.
Perfect.
Interestingly enough, my parents, who are not together, ended up staying across from each other like a block and a half away on the resort. And so I thought it was really interesting that the people who booked within the group had been separated, and we randomly just happened to be right within where the group, where the people actually were. So I thought it was interesting that the group in this isolated case, had no bearing on where they were placed or being kept together or anything. It was just it was still a random crapshoot.
It is a random crapshoot when it comes to resort rooms and flights. I think that you have to be the person who you're dealing with has to be on top of it. If people want specific flights, then they have to go through and book those flight seats. And you can do it. It's not something that can't be done. It can be done. It's just a matter of attentiveness on the person you're dealing with.
And I think that was one of the things that, for that second time, because we weren't as large of a group as we were for the first trip, there was a few of us, like my parents needed to come with us. And right, and wanted certain people had to come certain way. So those are the ones we booked together. But then my brother's coming in from Ottawa. People are coming from other
Right.
locations, so they weren't coming through the same airports any longer. So he was getting his own prices from his own
Right.
agent where he was. My son had to work, so him and his girlfriend were coming. I think they came in the day after us on a different flight, and they actually ended up doing a different airline. They couldn't even get on the same flight thing that we were, anyways. And then friends of mine from down southern Ontario, of course, because they don't have to come in from Sudbury, they were meeting us there, but they couldn't leave until they only showed up maybe 2 days prior to our VAL renewal, but they actually got to stay on their own for 3 days afterwards. Everybody
what we
left,
did.
right?
Right.
So there's a lot of flexibility in that. So, I mean, I've done both. I think it had to do with, at the time, the first time we did it, it was easier for a lot of the people wanted us to take care of. We wanted the one reservation. They wanted one booking.
Yeah.
They wanted one person to have, like I'm a nerd. I made actual big like information booklets
Yep.
for every single person who was coming on
Absolutely.
the trip with us. But
Even
it was,
booking, like 10, 12 years ago, was very different than it is now.
I'm sure,
Right?
yeah, I'm sure,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was one of the things that, a lot of the people that kind of relied on me and or somebody else, they didn't want to have to do anything to do with the booking. They basically wanted to say, you just tell me when and where I need to be someplace.
And I'll give someone a check and we're good.
Yes, that's exactly.
Exactly.
That's all they wanted to do, which was fine. And then by the second time, it was a little bit more, everybody had been traveling a lot on their own, so it was a little easier to kind of mix and match what they were, because they all had their own usual travel habits
Yeah.
by that time, right? You mentioned packages, so I know there's packages within the resort. So that comes into the wedding planning thing. So this would be
Yes.
Cynthia's little bee in her
I
bonnet.
have a lot to say about that.
Yes.
So here's the thing. It's I think one of the misconceptions about destination weddings is that it's cheaper to go away and get married. Now, I'm not saying it's more expensive, but I think if you're doing a destination wedding, you want a 5-star resort, you want a wedding with a photographer, with a video, with flowers, with all of the things, there's still a cost to that. And that was something that when people, and I think there's definitely an onus on the travel agent to really make sure that the buyer is informed what they're actually getting with their package. For example, when my brother and sister-in-law got married, I mean, they went with the base package. Like, well, we just want to take the one they throw in. It was cheap. It was whatever, $500 or something like that. And I tried to explain to my brother, I said, the $500 package or the cheap package is just basically you getting married. If you want more things, or sometimes it's got a champagne toast and maybe a cake. If you want a photographer, you've got to pay for a photographer. And he was like blown away that would be extra. I'm like, but did you review your package? In his case, the travel agent had not reviewed it. Or maybe they had, they just weren't clear enough with what the expectations were. But it's definitely not cheaper
No.
than getting married domestically. Things like a photographer, there's a cost to it. And I know he was concerned it was like $400 for the photographer. And then he had to pay for each individual print. And I said, well, that's the same as here in Canada. If you were to get a photographer here who's worth anything,
Right.
you're going to be paying a few $1,000s and you'll get your prints that way. The costs are the same. So I think it's really important for when people are booking destination weddings to have that idea in their head. Even when Mark and I got married 17 years ago, our trip cost as much as a traditional wedding would at that stage. But we got our honeymoon out of it. So that's the benefit of it, right? A lot of times people are doing bigger weddings and they can't afford to travel for their honeymoon. For us, the idea was we're getting married and we're getting our honeymoon at the same time. Not saving money, but getting a trip out of the deal.
And there's a neat thing now that's offered with a lot of travel agents is the bridal registry. And family members can, or like the
Has that been around
wedding.
for a long time? Because I love
Yeah.
that idea of the
It's-
certificates and the registry. for
yeah.
that.
What
Are people
happens?
doing it?
Yes, people do
I know
do it.
couples love the idea of it, and I've had couples ask me, "Should we register for?" And I'm like, "Well, honestly, I said, I think you should register for it, but they're not always having the success around people actually buying them those gift vouchers."
So the thing is that you can, if you set it up, basically you go in, you pick the location that you want to go on your honeymoon. Yeah.
Okay. And then
And-
people are just giving money to your
Yes,
honeymoon.
basically, and that's technically it. But however, the thing is that even if you only get $200 down or $300, you still have to pay for the majority because it's still booked, it's done, it's everything. It's so you have to be committed to this trip one way or the other.
Can
Yeah.
you buy just gift certificates that you
Absolutely.
can choose it later?
People-
Because there's a
people-
lot of people who don't go on their honeymoon right away.
So you know what? People could actually very easily go into probably anybody. Like they could go to anyone and who's a travel agent and say, "Listen, can we get a gift certificate from your agency for $25?" So that then that or whatever. I mean, I have no idea, but
I certainly hope it's not $25.
no,
Sorry.
like 150, 320, whatever. But you know what I'm saying, right? So
Now,
the reality,
ladies, large expensive gifts are not required for weddings.
exactly.
That's a whole other conversation.
Oh, I know, and that's the thing, right? So, yeah, I'm sure that there are availabilities. It's sort of like you can go on any site and say, "Can we get a gift card for?"
I think that'd be kind of cool, especially for the couples who are, especially if they're doing a destination wedding and they're big travelers.
Mm-hmm.
It might be one of those things that they don't want, because Norm and I were already living together,
Mm-hmm.
so we didn't need anything, like, even though we did get, did we get kitchen stuff.
Yeah.
And I got dishes and some things that I needed or wanted or I thought were nice. I mean, don't get me wrong, everything was generous and appreciated, but it'd be one of those things. I was just starting to travel more with him, and if it was one of those things that we could have said, "Hey, by all means, we don't want to. We don't
Yeah.
Gifts aren't needed. However, we love traveling and seeing the world. If if you'd like to give us something, maybe a gift certificate from such and such a place or whatever would
Yeah.
be really appreciated, and that can kind of help us add to us traveling the world."
Absolutely. I think it's a neat idea.
Yeah.
Okay, so as we were chatting, Stacy passed over one of the pamphlets that comes from one of the providers. I'm not going to identify who.
No.
And the reason why I'm bringing it up is I've flipped through, and I read fast. I've flipped through every page, and the only details they have on the wedding is the Crystal package considers all the aspects of the ceremony. It will be a wonderful choice that you will always remember.
It's a waste of a brochure space.
Literally, that is what it says. Oh, and then there's choose your favorite for the packages offered: Waves of Love, Pure Paradise, Ocean Pearl, Tropical Promise, and Lovebirds. There's no actual details as to what they are. So that's a classic example of a buyer beware, because even if you're providing the information that you're provided, it doesn't actually tell them what's included. And again, a travel agent, like if I booked for Stacy, she'd be looking into those details for
Right.
me for sure. But I think it's that idea of you're going to want to ask those questions, because if you're just going with the included wedding, you're probably getting, you're typically, I shouldn't say probably, you're typically getting an officiant, a bouquet, a cake,
And some bubbly.
Some bubbly. That's it.
That's it.
So my advice to travelers for doing a destination wedding is to budget for your hair, your makeup, your
Or bring someone with you that's a friend who
or
does
bring
all
a friend
that.
who does those
I
things.
did my own.
Yeah.
Or
exactly.
but if that's not your thing, right? That's
Right.
that's the idea. Or make sure you're budgeting for photos,
Mhm.
because if there's anything I preach, as far as when it comes to the professionals that you need to hire for your wedding, a photographer is one of them. Because you want to have some sort of memory of the day, because when your memory is fading, the photos are what is there to kind of prompt you and remind you from there on.
Absolutely.
And that was the biggest, I think, surprise for them. But even all the little things like where you're located, because some of them, their base package only includes, say, a garden wedding. If you want to get married on the beach, there's an extra charge for that.
Absolutely.
So things like that.
Absolutely. And these pamphlets are something that travel agents don't even get to see. This is if you go to the actual site and say, "Can I have your wedding portfolio?" So again, it's something that
And
it's really glossy and
they're
it's
very
nice,
stock photos.
very
of
nice, pretty
people.
pictures.
They're not even, you can't even really see the ceremony site very well.
And I think back on it, so my parents wanted to pay for our package. So they had a checklist. They knew what was included.
Yeah.
And my father would have been wandering around yelling at somebody if there was something missing off that damn
Yeah.
checklist. So I didn't just have a little bit of bubbly. I had a little Dominican guy that his job was to keep my glass full from the time my eyes open in the morning. I don't know if I don't think it was quite worded that way at the time, but essentially
like it wasn't
was
that.
fantastic. It was one of those things that he was just everywhere. I really feel bad that I don't remember his name because I spent so much time with him on my wedding day.
Well, and the thing is, I mean, like when we got married as well, we went in knowing that we were, because we had it was a Sandals wedding moon. So 90% of what we wanted was included. We paid extra for the photography and video package, knowing that was something that we had wanted to do. But if I get into the nitty gritty of where my kind of fly in my soup starts happening, is
Are we doing that now?
Can I do that now?
We can do that now.
Can I just totally take over and do
You can.
the other things? Is the idea that the on-site wedding coordinator is the same as having a wedding
A
coordinator.
real wedding coordinator?
I don't want to say real.
Sorry. A more qualified.
And I would,
We call it like a venue coordinator versus a wedding coordinator.
I'd agree with you there.
And the reason I say that is, I mean, certainly in our circumstance, my favorite story to tell is that when I went to walk down the aisle, there's no rehearsals. We didn't really know where we were walking or what we were doing, which was fine. We were pretty relaxed on the day and glad that we weren't really worrying about the little things. But we go to walk out, and she had brought me, I was like a size 2, maybe at the time. I was super, super tiny. And she brought me this big, huge, monstrous tropical bouquet full of orchids and lilies, which I'm allergic to. And I had ordered just a little tiny nosegay, it's called, like just a little tiny round thing of pink roses. And so I looked at the bouquet, I'm like, that's not my bouquet. And she looked at me, she went, it is now, slapped it in my hands, pushed me out the door. And I think if that had happened to one of my clients, I would literally lose my mind on them.
Yes.
Because I look at the pictures.
At the time, you don't have time to object.
You don't have time to object, you're just getting married and you're dealing. But I look at the pictures, the damn flowers are bigger than I was. You know, and that was not the look that I wanted. At the end of the day, who cares? I got married. But when I think about clients that we work with, those things are important. That if I had been there as a planner, and I'd seen those flowers delivered, I'd be like, okay, no, send those back. Let's get us the right flowers that they ordered, and would have dealt with it on behalf of the client. But because the client is so caught up in getting married, they don't have the time or the energy to argue that kind of thing.
And that might be one of the reasons why a lot of those things are always delivered at the last minute.
So
Right?
you don't have
They're
the
not doing
chance
too.
to.
Because I had a similar experience where the big running joke was I remember going through because the resort that I got married in, I had already been at this resort. So when it talks about your on-site wedding coordinators, I actually sat down with somebody the first time I was there, about 6 months prior. And it was one of those things that we had gone there for a corporate retreat. And the plan was while we were there, we were going to basically either rent a car, get someone to drive us around, and go see other resorts to choose where we were going to get married. Because we liked the area, but we just didn't know what resort we were going to go to. And then we decided we really liked the girl that we met with that drove us around that particular resort we were already on. And we went, you know what? I like the options of different things. They have this nice gazebo here. They have this other. There was 3 different places for us to choose for the ceremony. You know, we like the food there. I just thought, you know what? Everything's in a horseshoe shape. I don't have to worry about my elderly grandparents, right? Having to walk too far. I just like the layout of the place. I thought, you know what? This is going to be perfect. And because I actually liked her and I liked everything she was presenting, well, within 2 weeks after we got home, and Norm and I had talked in the plane on the way home from the first time saying, you know what? Let's go ahead and book it now just to choose the location so that we can worry about the final details later.
Kind of deal.
Anyways, within 2 weeks, she doesn't work there anymore.
Yeah.
And I got some other girl who now would return my emails once every 2 months or something like that. It was just so I did a lot of the work on my own, basically just hammering her full of emails, this new girl.
Yeah.
Who was obviously not on the ball. She was still fairly new to the role. I knew more about the resort and where things were than she did. So I would actually be detailed in my email saying, okay, we saw this, we had this package. I was looking at, they had a little photo album of all the flower options. And my big thing was, it says tropical flower bouquet. And I said, okay, I am not fussy about the colors. My girls were wearing a bright coral color. You know what, as long as they are I really don't care, right? And the big running joke was, I said, as long as they're not daisies. I don't know what it is for me. Like
Daisies aren't tropical though.
They're not, thank you. But that was the whole thing.
You could have had my bouquet.
My wedding flower that I actually had that emblem on are invitations, and I hand painted them on my glasses for my New Year's reception. All these things was the hibiscus because that just screams the tropics, right?
Yes.
So it was this coral colored hibiscus. That was kind of our flower. So I thought, you know what? I can't start asking them to trim up their bush. the bushes on the property to make my flowers. However, I'll just take whatever tropical flowers. I was not that fussy about it. Did I not get almost all daisies and my damn... And I thought, because as far as I'm concerned, daisies are cute. They're filler.
Yeah.
It's like you
baby's
just didn't...
breath.
Baby's breath. And I just thought, but that's not... And of course, they arrived to the room where I was finishing getting ready, 20 minutes before?
Yeah, and nobody can do a thing because there's no flowers
and
on
not
property.
to mention, if they're not, it's not like they're doing them there on the property.
No.
They're usually ordered in from a particular floral shop, probably half an hour away. And at the time, Punta Cana was a pretty small town back then compared to what it is now.
Right.
So there's probably like 1 or 2 flower shops in the entire area. So it's not that they did a bad job. The bouquet itself was nice, but it was nothing like, and it didn't look anything like the pictures.
Well, and that's the thing, is the idea that regardless of whether the package is included or you pay extra for the package, you're still paying a lot of money to be there and to get married at the resort. And for you not to get what you want, and again, you're not in a position at that point to start advocating for yourself, and you're just like, I'm just gonna get married and forget about it and not worry about it. So those are the things that get my goat kind of up. And then the other thing that we saw was the idea of not having a rehearsal. Less and less people are attending weddings themselves. They don't know where to stand, right side, left side. They don't know how to walk down the aisle. And that's a large part of the service that we provide, is actually walking them through the rehearsal and how to get to the front of the aisle, and that's where the officiant does their business. And that's not something that, from my experience, is done on the resort. So you're in a space you don't know. In our case, it was walking out of a door that we didn't know where it was leading to, and no idea. So at my brother's wedding, legit, first of all, my mother just started the procession out of nowhere
That's too funny.
with the men 15 minutes before the wedding time.
Oh, God.
Yeah. So they get there, all of a sudden they're starting, what the hell? No one knows where the bride is at this point because there's no one communicating with where the guests are compared to where the bride is. So, my mother just starts the procession on her own. They get to the front. My brother stands on the left-hand side, which is traditionally the bride's side. So he's and I'm watching things happen, and my husband...
You're gripping the side of your chair.
knows me well, and I'm like, don't say anything, Cynthia, don't say anything, Cynthia. The night before, my sister-in-law had asked, we don't even know where we're going. I'm like, well, do you want me to run you through it? Like, I'll run you through a procession on how to... Yeah, I don't know, I'm sure they'll go through it tomorrow. I'm like, oh. So then, literally, my brother stood there for about 5 minutes on the left-hand side. I'm like, okay, no, Mikey, other side. He's like, oh, okay, thanks. And he went and stood, and all the guys went and stood on the other side. But then they stood there in the blistering hot sun for 20 minutes.
Because
The bride was not ready. No one had let them know that you have to wait till the bride is ready before you start the procession. Like these little things that
surprising.
are not a big deal, you think, but can be a big deal on the day because no one knows what is going on.
And one of the things I noticed too, and I mean, I've attended a couple, is that I think that the people that are planning it down there aren't really in the same mind frame as people coming from North America.
Yeah.
Standing in that heat is very hot.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not conducive to a lot of things. So you need to bring, and I've been to weddings where they actually only show up 3 minutes before the bride shows up. And that's exactly, like, it's the people attending that have to suffer through. It's not the people that are in the parties that should suffer.
Yeah.
And that's part of the planning too, though. But that's not, I mean, as a travel agent, to be on property, it's okay to do that because it would facilitate what's the plan, where are they meeting, how are they going, and as we were talking, it'd be neat to have a wedding
planner there
and your travel agent
to make sure
at
all these
your
things
destination wedding, because then it's like there's a problem. There's a problem here. There's a problem here, and it makes sense.
Well, and even like again, my parents are not together. They haven't been together for 18 years. I have a lovely stepmother. They've been married over 10 years now, and it was not it's still an acrimonious relationship. So my parents don't speak. My mother-in-law or my stepmother and my mother had not been in the same room in 20 years, and so there was a lot of emotion front up in the day. Well, if the photographer isn't posing my parents together with my brother for photos, which was super uncomfortable, we could just see the discomfort in the posing. My stepmother on the sidelines going,
but now I'm a part of it as well.
And they did, and I took a photo of the four of them, of like my stepmother and my father with my new sister-in-law and my brother. The kids, and I say the kids, they're not that much younger than I am, but they didn't know. They don't think, the couple don't think about these things, that they need to set this stuff up and they need to have this conversation. But that's like a standard conversation that we have as planners.
Absolutely.
When we first sit down, what's the family dynamic like? You know, is everyone together, or do we have sometimes they're split and they're super social. Can we post them together? Can we not? And because typically with a destination wedding, you're going to a country with a different culture potentially, or a different kind of way of viewing things. And like you had said, Steph, that sometimes they're not concerned about these things. They don't, or Stacey had said they're not concerned about these things. This is just how they do things in their country.
Right.
And so I think if you're concerned about, or you've got some of these more complex issues, speaking to a professional in those regards is definitely a lot more valuable, because that's not what the venue's priority is. The venue's priority is making sure you get a ceremony.
And I don't think it's I don't want to say, I don't think
No.
it's because it's a culture thing.
No.
And I don't think it's because of what they think is a wedding, because I've seen some pretty elaborate weddings
Yeah.
at some of these
fair.
locations. I think it has to do with their job is to sell the package.
Yeah.
Yes.
And their job is to do, like, basically check those little boxes, and that's the extent of it.
Now, the funny thing is, though, if you're aware going, and I mean, I've prepped people who have gone to destination weddings. I've attended them previous to being a travel agent. One was a disaster. The other one was extremely organized. The bride and the groom had a clipboard. They met with the planner, who they were talking to all along, 2 days before the wedding. They met the next day, and they met the morning of. And you have to be in charge.
Well, that's why
of
the
your
bride and groom were their own planner.
And that's the thing. And when you said to me,
that's what
like,
happened with
you
me,
said, when you said earlier, you said they went, oh, well, we'll figure it out tomorrow. No, they won't.
Yeah.
You need to know that what you have in your head and your mind is what's going to happen. Probably won't, unless you've discussed it with them in front of them.
And I think, I mean, that's a challenge that we have, like in my industry overall, the idea of what a wedding planner or a wedding coordinator is. It's a very loosey-goosey title. And in my sister-in-law's defense, she was told she had a wedding planner. Right? So even though her sister-in-law was a wedding planner, we had chatted, and I threw them a ceremony here, because we'll talk about the idea of getting married in a Spanish-speaking country, and the legalities around those ceremonies being recognized here in Ontario. But because she was like, well, I've got a wedding planner, so you don't have to worry about it. And I think it's important for people to understand, like
You don't.
Stephanie said, you get someone whose job is to sell the package and set things up, but you really do need to do your own planning. You
Yes.
really do need to make sure that all of those things that you are expecting, that you're actually making sure they're happening, because your planner on the site. I'm doing little quotation marks,
No,
you just can't see
it's
them.
true. What they are is actually wedding coordinators, and
I
what
would even hazard that
but
that
what they
is a stretch.
coordinate is location of the wedding, service, what day, and all of the other wedding parties on that property. The exact same thing. The timing, how many per day, what location. That's what they coordinate.
Yeah, and they do bring in the legality. I will give them credit that they take care of licensing and the officiant, which is the important stuff.
No, I didn't have that.
Really? Oh,
I
we
didn't do
had
that.
that with ours.
So maybe mine was a little while ago. One of the cool things, one of the reasons we chose Dominican Republic, and this is probably the only reason we're going to get this topic in, is I promised my mother that we were going to have a Roman Catholic ceremony.
Oh yes.
So when I first announced to my parents that because Norm and I had decided once we got engaged, we had that conversation before we told anybody else we were even engaged, what we wanted. We wanted to go away to get married. Being away, traveling, being in the sun, that was something that we were deciding. And our plan was we were going to plan this, and whoever can join us can, and whoever can't, can't. And we had to be okay with that. But my mother convinced me that both of us, so we both had been raised kind of Catholic Church, mine more than him. But we had both been baptized and everything else. So we were in honor of my grandparents who were coming, and I think my grandmother would have been very sad, or my grandparents would have been very upset not to have that Catholic church type wedding. So we managed to, in the Dominican, we had an actual Roman Catholic priest who married us. Unfortunately, in most locations like Mexico or anywhere else, as much as you can find Catholic priests there, they, depending on where the location is, they're very adamant and you must be in a church.
Yeah, you have to
Or
get married
next
on
week.
consecrated ground.
Yeah, no, not so much where I was.
That's
So in Punta Cana at the
fascinating.
time, it had to be, we could get married in the gazebo. So it could not be on the beach. It had to be a covered, the idea is that like, we had to have a covered shelter. So there was this really pretty walkway that went to a private gazebo that we could have the ceremony in. And I loved that idea because Cynthia knows how much I hate getting married, seeing wedding couples exchanging their vows on a beach with a guy in a Speedo in behind.
Oh, I got a whole conversation about that coming too.
We'll close with that fun stuff.
Yeah.
But it was one of those things that I really wanted to have a quiet thing. I've also seen, and it happened at my vow renewal, where some stranger basically grabbed a glass of bubbly and joined in.
Amazing.
Yeah, she just kind of, we're like,
Yeah.
who's the lady in the hat? But she just kind of crashed the party. Kind of felt like it, right?
Happens.
So it was one of those things that it was very important to us to keep it kind of private. So because it was out of the way and off the beaten path, literally, I really loved that idea. So we still had the Catholic. And the other cool thing was, and this is probably going to tie into our segue into what you were talking about, other languages. So yes, we had to get our birth certificates and certain things. We had to go through the same Roman Catholic. We had to go through the marriage prep course here in Ontario. And then our priest had to fill in forms and basically do this official permission for us to have our wedding in another location. And the way they explained it to us was, even if you were a member of this parish and you decided to go and get married at another parish within the city,
You have to get permission.
you still have to get permission from one priest to allow it to happen in the other. So we had to go through the same marriage prep course. You still had to fill all the same forms. I still had to pay my own parish a certain fee to have all this processed. And then they gave me the documents, or they sent documents directly to that priest. And then my documents that had to get translated. The cool thing is that we happen to have a priest who's from Quebec.
Oh, beautiful.
What are the odds? Because my husband's stuff was all in French. Right? Because he comes from a French family and his family church was French.
Yeah.
So his birth certificate's in French, his baptism is in French. So all of those things, they accepted his French, so we didn't actually have to have it translated. So it was only mine that had to get translated. But it was still this kind of cool thing that we had a Catholic ceremony. It's a Catholic ceremony without the
Mass.
Eucharist.
Yes.
So it was a shorter mass, but we still got some of the same readings. My grandparents still got to be involved in it and kind of made everyone happy, and we weren't sitting in the heat for an hour and a half.
Nice.
Right.
So it's kind of like the best of both worlds, but I don't know. So there is that capability in certain locations to look into. And actually the interesting thing is it might be that if you belong to a particular religion, especially in most of those areas, it is very Christian Roman Catholic.
Yeah.
So I would always check with, maybe ask around to your own parish priest about if they probably have contacts, because I'm guaranteeing you're not the first one to ask. So that was one of the cool things. And then I wanted to talk about the vow renewal just to get my last thing in before you start talking about languages. But at our vow renewal, we didn't have seats for our guests. There was no plans. I got picked up in a golf cart. Well, actually, Norma and I did because we were both married. So we got picked up and brought to the site. My family and friends or whatever hanging out in the front. It was in front of a gazebo because we didn't even know where. And we had already met with this lady the day before. There was almost like no instructions. It was going to be kind of loose and casual. I didn't want to pay for anything major. But there was no direction. There was no plans. Yeah. It was kind of like, she goes, okay, now you go up there and then you go over here. And it was just this weird, there was silence, there was no music, there was no, it was just lawn.
My brother and sister-in-laws, there was no music.
Are you serious?
There was a few flowers here and there. There was a few flowers, and yes, we got to go and have an a la carte dinner, but I had to fight. Compared to our wedding, I say our first wedding, our wedding, part of our package was we had an upgraded a la carte, and we also got to be almost in a private area within the a la carte restaurant. One of the restaurants actually on that property it only held so many people. So we actually got the place to ourselves that night. We had a choice of 2 different places, and they would actually close it down. You know, some nights
we had that too.
Those restaurants are closed.
Nice.
So we had it to ourselves, which was great. And we were a group of 22 or 23 at that time. But this time there was, I want to say 15 of us. So we weren't the same size of group, but we still... I just didn't want to be sitting in the cafeteria style buffet thing.
No,
right?
Never, no.
Just to sort of celebrate with family and friends. So it didn't have the same feel that I was expecting. I mean, we still had a great time. It was nice to see everyone because we invited the same people who were at the wedding 10 years prior.
Very
so it was
cool.
kind of cool to see. We tried to duplicate some of the pictures.
Very nice.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. But anyways, that whole thing about the officiant, I don't think a lot of people realize that there is some flexibility when it comes to the actual ceremony.
The funniest part, my brother's ceremony, so our Mark's and mine was about 15 minutes long. It was nice. It wasn't overly fancy or anything like that. My brother's wedding was 7 minutes. It was legit the fastest ceremony I have ever seen.
I do kiss and make up.
Literally. And it's so funny because I had, so with the language thing, so because the paperwork all comes from Dominican and Spanish, in order to have it legalized in Ontario, you have to pay for translation to have it translated into English or French so that they can then be registered here in Ontario. My brother wasn't keen on that, so we'd spoken about doing a ceremony here. So I have a friend, because this is what I do. I've got a good friend of mine who offered to do the ceremony at no charge. And so we ended up throwing a really nice kind of mini ceremony at our house 2 weeks before we left. That ceremony was longer. Well, it was my friend Bill who did the ceremony. He does beautiful ceremonies, and he's like, so we want a little more than the coffee table ceremony, which is where they come in and do will you, but not a full on thing. So their legalization ceremony was actually longer than their wedding, which I thought was just so bizarre.
It's a cool idea to actually do the.
You know what, that just triggered a question to me. Could you actually bring someone to be your officiant?
No, they have to be legally registered within the space that you're getting married. So, for example, in Ontario, in order for a ceremony to be recognized, they have to be a registered officiant for
Ontario.
The province of Ontario. Okay. I think it depends where you go. Potentially, like in the States, they got that like United Life Church, whatever, that people will get legalized online.
They call it the Church of whatever.
Yeah, so it's only legal in certain states and whatever else. But when you brought up the vow renewal, it reminded me that 3 years after we got married in Antigua is where we got married. We went to Vegas and renewed our wedding vows, and it was all
different atmosphere.
I wanted the cheese. We got married at the Little White Wedding Chapel where Britney Spears got married, and I think Mickey Rooney had a few of his weddings there. Michael Jordan had a few of his weddings there. So all this random places. So we go there, and I wanted to go through the drive-through.
Oh, fantastic!
And I wanted to be up out the roof of the limo, because I'm like, I'm gonna go full on. If I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna do it. So we get there, they send me a limo with no roof, so now I'm already cranky. I'm like, okay, so here I go again. I'm not getting what I want. So then we get to the chapel. I'm like, well, I'm not going through the drive-through and trying to say my vows through his window or whatever. So we got out, and they had a gazebo, was all done in red velvet. Oh. And so we go in there, and my girlfriend, who was familiar with my tropical flower story, said she ran next door. There was a flower shop. And she comes back with a bouquet of lilies. And she said, I went to get you the pink roses, but they were $100. And the lilies were $20. I thought it was better just perpetuate the story as opposed to getting you the flowers you wanted. And then the ceremony was actually really, really pretty. The words that the officiant said, I was they were really heartfelt, probably more so than our first wedding. But right in the middle of our vow renewal, if a big, huge transport truck with a naked woman doesn't come by with the girls written across,
yes,
you know you're getting married in Vegas when the transport truck with the girls on it goes across.
Oh my gosh.
So again, different experiences. And but for our vow renewal, it was meant to be a lot more we're just going there to be silly and do something fun and different and whatever else. So it's about setting expectations.
So us girls could have went on and on and on. Destination weddings are like talking about any other weddings. There are so many scenarios and locations and good stories and bad stories and tips that you can be sharing. We could probably be talking about them for another hour or so at the very least. But this is our second wedding themed episode, and we think we're going to do at least one more this coming fall. So if you know anyone who's getting married, make sure to stay tuned to find out when the next wedding episode will be. We'll probably set it up similar to the spring episode where there was a contest, and if you happen to be in the area where we're taping, you can actually come and ask us questions, kind of like getting free planners just before your big day. So if you wanted to see some funny pictures from our destination weddings, we've kind of gathered a bunch to put in the show notes just to show you some of the good and not so good. Wait till you see some of the old pictures from our weddings. Man, my hair was long. It was actually kind of fun. But I also put my vow renewal, a couple of photos from there as well. And Stacey's going to be providing a couple of links and anything else that you need to ask us directly. Feel free to always reach out to us by email, either at flavor@stephaniepichet.ca, or go ahead and comment or post something directly on our Facebook page, and one of us will get back to you as soon as we can. So in the meantime, make sure you take a look through the show notes in case there's anything interesting there, just to kind of give you a full rounded experience in listening to this show. And check us out on all the podcast playing platforms right now. We're on Google Play and TuneIn Radio, Stitcher Radio, and Spotify, and you know the rest. And as always, if you can't find us there and you want to do it the old school way on a desktop, you can always reach us at flyingforflavor.ca. Until next week, enjoy the sunshine. It's finally here. Woohoo!